Hello techies. Welcome to our brand new video series focused on helping you get the most of your experiences in life. Before we start the video, let's know about Upptalk. Upptalk is a live, interactive platform for software training, furnishing robust personalities who could take on universal business platforms.
We were talking about compensation grids and grid profiles. So what is the compensation grid? It is the pay range, and that is given as a reference. Right. We said that it's a guideline. You have to. You can follow the compensation grid, or you can have a value that is a little bit outside the range as well. Right. So grids may include additional pay ranges, like together a composition components to define the estimated earnings. Now, what are grade profiles? Grade profiles will allow you to assign a worker to a different compensation range than the default. And why do we use it when we have to localize right, when there is a localization component right? So you have one default range, but you are going to assign workers to a different range based on the localization requirements. That is where you should use grade profiles. Right. So should you always use grade profiles? Is it always important to use grade profiles? The answer is no, it is not important. It's not always required to use grade profiles. It's an optional thing. You may use it, may not use it. If you are going to use grade profiles, then what should you do? You should set up the range in the compensation grid as 0. Right. In the grid, you do not need to mention any range, and then you will actually define the individual ranges in the grade profiles. Right in the grade profiles, you also have the option to define the ranges, and that is what you will do. Now it's all okay to define the grade profiles, etc. Now comes the question like, how would you assign this compensation grid to the workers? Right. To the employees that you are going to hire, how you are going to assign this compensation grid. So what are the two different ways? Anybody? Can you try? What are the two different ways of assigning the grid to the workers? 1. The first option, and the most recommended option, is to directly assign it to the job profile. Right? We will assign the compensation grid directly to the job profile. Correct. So that is a recommended approach, and it should be considered when you are creating your job criterion to identify which employees are getting which compensation grid. Then you can consider using the eligibility rules for assigning the compensation grid to the workers. Right, so you have both these options. Of course, eligibility rules we will use in other things as well, but here also you can use eligibility rules in the compensation grid. Right. But the recommended approach, even I have seen it in very large organizations with as many as, 300,000 employees, they do this approach where they assign the compensation grid directly to the job profile. Right now, if such a large organization can manage it in this way, so of course smaller organizations will definitely be able to manage. Okay. Alright, so now let's go ahead and review what we did. We created the compensation grid, so today we will create the grade profiles. Okay, so let's log in as Logan. Alright. So now let's quickly go to our compensation grid. So what is the task? To create a compensation grid. Be a compensation grid. Now, if I want to change it, what should I do? Maintain. Okay, let me try maintain comp grid. Okay. Maintain concrete. Well, there is nothing called as maintain concrete. Right. It is something called a grid hierarchy, which is not important in this case, but we have something called as edit comp grid. Okay. Edit comp grid. So that is the one that we will use. So we created one compensation grid. Let's see if it is still there. So we created one which says managers or above. Right. This is the one we created. Click. OK. And we had left the range as 0. In the compensation grid, we have defined the range as 0 because we are going to use great profiles. Right. So let's define the great profile. So I'm going to create 2 great profiles. First one I will call as www. This, call it as managers or above, or what is the name actually? Managers or above, right. So let's call it as managers or above in USA. Right. This is my great profile. So for the US manager, I'm going to define a page. What is my base page element? My base page element is base page. Right. This is find element. Now, if you call it as M1, that is fine. I mean if in your organization they call it as M1, P1, C1, D1, that is also fine. No problem. Right. But here we do not have any limitation to the length of the name. So we can define the full name. Right, no problem. Yeah, if you want to have, let's say, M1 managers in USA, that is also fine. No problem. Okay. But what you are saying is, he is the kind of the level. Right. So the hierarchy level or the seniority level. Right. So maybe in your operators you say, see that, yeah, you are going to join in level C1. You are going to join in level M1. Right. So that is the case. Yes, then what happens is in those organizations, they have that page agreed. So in the system you may want to configure that M1, C1, D1, J1 is like that. Absolutely fine, no problem. Because work, they should mimic or replicate your conventions. Whatever naming convention is followed in the organization. Everywhere we will not use the same kind of thing. But in work, there is no restriction on the length of the name that you can specify. So here you can do it like this. So you can specify M1 and call it as managers in the US. No problem. And what is a great profile description? So we will manage or above in the USA. Correct. And we are talking about the base pay component. Now here you see, it says eligibility rules, and the eligibility rules is mandatory. Okay. Now we just now said
Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us at sales@uptalk.com.